Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about the two full moons that we have in, I said that weird, two full moons we have in Capricorn happening in June and July of 2024. Now, I've already talked about the June 21st full moon in Capricorn in my previous video. I'll link that down below. But I wanted to talk about why I think it's very special that we have two full moons in Capricorn. I think I touched on it in my previous video, but I want to go a little bit more into depth about it. And I've meditated on this more since I made that video, obviously, and I just have some new insights that I wanted to share with you guys. I briefly mentioned how in my previous video, how, generally we don't have two full moons in one sign right after one another. So I wanted to go a little bit deeper into that. Last year in Aries season, we had a new moon at 0 degrees Aries in March, and then we had a new moon again at 29 degrees of Aries at the end of April, or at the end of Aries season. So ever since then, there's been this kind of like reversal in how we experience new and full moons. Generally, let's say, for example, we move into Gemini season, we'll have a new moon in Gemini, and then towards the end of the season, we'll have, 2 weeks later, we'll have a full moon in Sagittarius. Then when Cancer season comes about, we have a new moon in Cancer, and then 2 weeks later, we have a full moon in Capricorn. And that's generally how the new moon, full moon cycles go. Because we had two new moons in Aries last year in 2023, since then, we've inversed that. So now, for example, when we would enter Gemini season, we would have a full moon in Sagittarius and then a new moon in Gemini. And then we enter Cancer season and we get a full moon in Capricorn and then a new moon in Capricorn. So it's been a very interesting reversal of that. And I just wanted to let you guys know that that's what's been going on. So now that we have the two full moons in Capricorn, it's going back to normal after this. And so it's going to start being the new moon first and then the full moon for every season. And so these two full moons in Capricorn from June 21st and July 21st, in my opinion, feel like, and I don't use this word often, and so please bring some nuance into it, but it feels like kind of like a portal almost of a portal of karma. That sounds like a movie title or something. It sounds so intense. But because Capricorn is ruled by the Lord of Karma, Saturn, and Pluto is moving back into the 29th degree of Capricorn for the last time in our lives from September to like mid-November of this year. I can't remember the exact date, but it's September 1st to like November 15th or something like that. So this all feels quite intense, and it feels like very much there's a completion that is happening. And generally, I don't like making my transit videos more than 2 to 3 days out from the actual transit, depending on the transit. But I wanted to bring this information to you guys to kind of sit with and see how you feel about it for a little bit longer before the full moon happens at 29 degrees Capricorn on July 21st. Pluto going back into 29 degrees of Capricorn feels like a major completion to this journey that we've been on with Pluto in this part of our chart for 15 years, almost 16 years now. There is something that no longer is going to be working out, okay? This full moon, July 21st, is also at 29 degrees, which we've talked about before. This is an anaretic, karmic, fated degree. There's an urgency to this degree. There's an urgency to complete something. And so it's almost like we're getting a foreshadowing of what is to come when Pluto goes back into this area of Capricorn again for the last time during this full moon. So if you are somebody who journals or keeps tracks of these things, it would be very interesting to see if you can journal around what's going on around this full moon in Capricorn, given, a few days before, a few days after, and see how that comes up again or not when Pluto goes back into Capricorn from September to November of this year. And it feels like there is some sort of culmination happening with this full moon, and yet it's not maybe quite done yet. The feeling that I'm getting is that if we are not, it feels like for most of us, there is going to be a sense that something needs to end, but maybe a lot of us still aren't quite ready to end that. And then when Pluto goes back into Capricorn, maybe we'll almost be like pushed to end that, or really get to a breaking point where we realize that we can no longer do something. What Pluto wants to finish or complete in this part of your chart, the Capricorn house in your chart, is wanting to be ended for good. It can't be a part of your story in the same way that it has been before for a long time. Pluto in Capricorn has shown us what true power is. And because it's in Capricorn, it's saying it comes from taking responsibility for yourself and to be your own sense of authority, especially, like I said, in the part of your chart that Capricorn rules. The way that I'm intuitively feeling this is that there is something that you no longer have energy for. The amount of energy that it's taking to maintain this thing is no longer sustainable for you. So either it's just taking so much energy in general, or you're recognizing that the amount of energy you're putting into something is not the output of it, the result, the outcome of that is no longer sustaining you enough to make you want to continue putting that much of energy into it. You're having these thoughts about, what could I do if my energy wasn't going towards this and I was taking more responsibility over my power in this part of my life and actually putting it towards something that's more aligned. I said this, I made a video a few months ago about Pluto and Capricorn. I'll actually link that one down below too, because I feel like it still resonates for me. Is that there's a feeling in us that we know that something just can no longer go on, and yet we're scared of letting it go. But it's coming to a breaking point almost. Yeah, and when this full moon happens on July 21st, there is the ruler of this moon is going to be, the moon is going to be retrograde. So Saturn's retrograde, whereas with the first full moon in Capricorn in June, it was not. There is a very reflective quality. And that's what I'm saying is, like, I feel like journaling and just taking note and reflecting on what's happening during this time is going to be very helpful in order for us to be able to recognize the patterns that may arise again in September, October, November of this year. When Pluto transits a part of our chart, it's asking for transformation and growth, and it reveals through all of this your true power. I'm linking a lot of videos down below, but I have another video that I talked about how I frame Pluto transits in a way that's kind of helped me understand them at a different level. So I'll link that down below too if you're interested regarding Pluto transits and your natal Pluto. It's not comprehensive, but it was just an idea that I had been thinking about for a really long time that felt very, very true and accurate from my experiences. So it might be a piece of the puzzle, in my opinion, for you guys. But a lot of this change can feel very painful because this growth generally comes through crisis and massive transformation and these like tower moments where things come crumbling. But Pluto is a long transit, so it's like, you know, it happens over a sustained period of time. And in my previous video that I just did on the Mars-Uranus conjunction, I talked about how if we can move with these changes rather than resist them, it can sometimes mitigate the intensity of the transformations. Yeah, and it's like Pluto transit work in waves. Thank God, right? Because this like constant transformation would be exhausting. But it sometimes feels like, you know, when it's on a low wave, we kind of just like, oh, well, finally take a breather and just like go back to being comfortable. And yeah, like, you know, maybe we can find a little bit more balance within that. So it's not just like intensity and then like just giving up, and then intensity and then just giving up. And instead, if we can just invite change on a more regular basis into our lives. Listen, I'm a Leo rising with Jupiter and Mars and Leo in my first house, Taurus on my midheaven. I'm not sitting here acting like this is easy, okay? I am not the person who loves change in a lot of areas of my life. However, I have learned, because I struggled so much with Pluto in the 6th, that I have had to learn how I can work with that energy. Like I said, I mentioned this about the Mars Uranus as well. It's like same, but different. So let me kind of go back to this full moon that's happening on July 21st at 29 degrees of Capricorn. Like I said, it's a 29th degree. Most people feel kind of uncomfortable with this kind of energy. It feels kind of unstable. And yet it is also finishing up this like lunar inversion that we've had. And so it feels like the period between June 21st and July 21st have been like this increased time that we can work with our karma a little bit and affect our karma. And karma is not inherently bad, right? We have good and bad karma, or positive and negative karma. So I feel like this opportunity, we have an opportunity to affect our karma more than we normally would during this time. And so paying extra attention to your house of Capricorn during this time, I think would be very useful for most people. And so that's why I wanted to really make this video, is to just encourage you to think about that, even if it was for like 5 minutes a day, every day, until this next full moon, and how you can be affecting that part of your chart in a more positive way. On top of all this is still a full moon, right? And full moons are always in opposition between the sun and the moon. This time it's between Capricorn and Cancer. Again, oppositions generally work through trying to find balance, and sometimes bring us into that balance by having intense emotions or illuminating something out of nowhere, or someone outside of us, because oppositions are very relational. It's like a very Libra-like energy. So a lot of times it can be changes or balance brought in by someone outside of us instigating some sort of reaction internally. So a lot of times, you know, we say that full moons are a beautiful time to reflect, because you may be getting some new information or illumination, and our feelings can often be feeling very intense during this time. So better to reflect rather than to make really rash actions. And with Saturn being involved here, because it's the ruler of the moon, there is a reality check that can happen here. And a time to get to work. It's a really good time to work hard. Like I said, the ruler of Saturn, or the ruler of Capricorn, Saturn, is retrograde during this time. Yet I feel like this is, because of that, it's giving us an opportunity to go inward and really work hard on this part of our chart and just tie up the loose ends that we didn't quite get to during the last full moon in Capricorn. Uranus will be squaring Mercury in Leo during this time as well. Mercury is in shadow during this time, so that means that this square from Uranus is going to happen 3 times. So what are we thinking about during this full moon? We're going to have that come back when Mercury's retrograde to be reevaluated, and then when Mercury's retrograde again, or I'm sorry, he's going direct again, Uranus will square it again. So Uranus may be trying to get us to think about things in a different way. Whenever I see a Uranus and Mercury hard square, I do also think of a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of overthinking, not, and yet also really speaking in a way that maybe isn't thought through, like impulsive speaking definitely can happen. So be aware of that. But whatever does happen regarding our thoughts, our communications, and our environments during this time will come back up for review when Mercury's in retrograde. So just interesting to note this. Just a random blurb that I've been finding really interesting. I talked about it in another video, but the fact that Pluto in Capricorn is a Pluto return for America. And now, we're in this time period and there's all this talk about, who is the candidate really going to be? And, are they going to change this person during between these two full moons? And then I'm excited to see how that relates to when Pluto goes back into Capricorn for the election this year. I just think that, like I said, we're trying to close a chapter. And so I'm always so intrigued to see how things play out like this, because Pluto in Capricorn has really been about breaking down institutions and structures that are no longer working for the people. And yet when we deal with these large institutions and government and all these large structures that have been built over time, it's always a very slow change. Right? It doesn't just happen, Pluto return, and then everything crumbles. It generally takes time for things to start really manifesting outwardly. So I have some questions for you. Are you tending to your house of Capricorn right now? Can you make a commitment to reflect on your Capricorn house things for 5 to 10 minutes a day until July 21st? Capricorn loves responsibility and working hard. Are you taking responsible actions rooted in integrity in that part of your chart? Are you taking care of what needs to be taken care of? I recommend that you listen to my previous video that I did about the full moon in Capricorn to get a better understanding of what part of your chart it's affecting. I will also put down in the description for the Aries sun rising, Taurus sun rising, whatever, which house this is affecting. As I was finishing up this video, I had a inkling to check my tarot cards, and the bottom of the deck was the Tower. And I was like, this might be indicative of this full moon. But I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna worry too much about it. And then I felt called to look at my tarot cards again. So I shuffled them and I said, all right, let me hear it. Let me hear what's going on. And I'm shuffling the cards and I'm shuffling cards about the full moon in Capricorn. And I get the Tower again. So I saw it on the bottom of the deck and then I pulled the tarot card and I was like, I feel like I want to talk about this, because in my previous video, I talked about how the tarot can sometimes give me information that maybe I'm not immediately drawn to. And I feel like the Tower card could symbolize kind of a lot of the things I already talked about, like full moons being a time of illumination, and the Uranus square Mercury in Leo, suddenness, sudden breakthrough, right? Like all these things could very well be happening. But the Tower card is a major arcana, which means that it generally is working on bigger themes in our lives than just the small whatever's happening right now, which makes sense because of everything I just said about it relating to Pluto and Capricorn. But I also failed to mention how this full moon has an out of sign conjunction with Pluto in Aquarius retrograde at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So yes, it's out of sign, but they're still very close. And of course, we know Pluto is very transformative and it's very crisis-like. It can create those situations. And the Tower is very much that energy of some sort of sudden breakthrough or some sudden change that happens that initiates for us to have this moment of something's collapsing, something's falling apart. And so as I was thinking about it before, I was like, you know what, should I talk about this? I was like thinking, how could this be? And like I said, the Uranus Mercury square is definitely something. The conjunction to the moon with Pluto is definitely something that could bring this about. But I think what's really happening for a lot of people is like this reiteration of a full moon illumination in this part of our chart is going to get us to be really clear through some sudden event or some sudden thought or some sudden realization or some sudden emotions that arise that we really need to finish something up. Like everything I was just saying, right? But I felt called to say this, and I was gonna pull some extra cards, but I was like, you know what? Let me get back on camera and see, because I feel like even though I'm literally just speaking to nobody, but I feel like I'm speaking to you guys when the camera's on. It feels like the energy of you guys is still with me, even though I'm alone right now. So let's see. I got the Tower card and I just want to get some clarifiers about this. So we'll get a clarifier and then I'll pull an advice card. Okay. Now I just want an advice card, please. I feel like I already kind of gave advice through my astrological interpretation, but why not get some more information? So the clarification I got for the Tower was this, this came up in my Mars-Uranus conjunction, which also had a Uranus conjunction or Uranus aspect in there, just like how this full moon has Uranus square Mercury. So this came through for one of the signs, and I remember feeling like it was so, I got 3 aces for those signs, for that reading. And I thought that was very telling because the aces are like a hand coming out of thin air. And so this really represents to me the suddenness of Uranus, of this having a breakthrough. So it feels like for a lot of people, this Tower moment it may be instigated by event for sure, especially because it's around the Mars-Uranus algal conjunction. But I think for a lot of people, it's through a idea. It's through a spark of inspiration that occurs that makes you realize that some of the foundations that you've built in your life are really not strong and they're not built in a way that is aligned to you. So this kind of is actually, I don't want to say it makes me feel a little bit better because like I said, the Capricorn full moon being so close to Pluto on July 21st could make it feel, we could experience that as a more difficult transit. And so this is not inherently a super difficult card, and it's actually quite inspiring and imaginative. So I really believe that it's some sort of idea or some sort of breakthrough within that creates the Tower moment for us. Now, the advice I got was the 3 of Swords, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not super excited about I'm sorry, should I try to mask myself and be like, no, this is great? Very interesting for me to get this as an advice for everybody, because when I see this card, it's generally a card that is signifying some sort of betrayal. What I'm hearing is there's a betrayal of the self. Maybe this idea that you're having that's creating a Tower moment is causing you during the full moon to recognize how this entire time you've abandoned yourself, that you've betrayed yourself. And I feel like this is something that we do very often, that in search of safety, security, harmony, peace, stability, we relinquish our needs. And I think a lot of times this is done so subconsciously. They're like, no, I'm not relinquishing my needs. And then we have like a breakthrough that makes us realize that the ways in which we have lacked responsibility for our lives has been because of a lack of love for the self, and therefore abandoning the self. For example, just like, I can give you so many examples, but just one right off the top of my head is, let's say you have Capricorn in the 7th house of relationships, and you have this sudden breakthrough idea that this relationship that you've been in is not fulfilling the purpose in your life, and that you have a creative idea that you want to move towards. And so this is all very positive, and it causes a tower moment in your relationship, whether that's a breakup or whether that's just an understanding that something within that relationship has to change in order for you to move forward. And then with that comes this realization that how long have I been abandoning myself? How long have I been betraying myself in order to keep this relationship alive? Like, I'm saying this with Capricorn in the 7th house, for example. Just it could be depending really in any part of your chart that Capricorn is in. There's been like a sense of self-sabotage there. And if you're not feeling this, it means that you've been doing the work that Saturn wants you to do in that chart, and you should be very, very proud of yourself. And even if you feel this way, like, you should still be proud of yourself, because you are trying your best, and that's all that we can do in every given moment. So pulling this as an advice card for me feels like it's trying to say that learn from this. Don't do this again. This feels like the completion of the Pluto and Capricorn that's asking to happen. I just got chills. The completion that's asking to happen is a reoccurring pattern of self-sabotage. Through recognizing that when we are not taking full responsibility for our actions within our lives, and specifically for this video where we have Capricorn in our charts, we are hurting ourselves. We are breaking our own heart. We are betraying ourselves. And what's Pluto and Capricorn and this full moon is illuminating, but then Pluto and Capricorn is trying to really finish, is this pattern in that part of our chart where we're stepping on our own toes, where we are not recognizing how much of what's happened in that part of our life didn't have to get as bad as it did, because for some reason we were self-sabotaging. And I want you to have some grace and compassion also for yourself, right? Like, this very much feels like it could be quite a painful illumination, a painful recognition of what's been going on. And I want you to understand that you don't know what you don't know, or you don't know what you don't know that you don't know. I don't know. But, have some compassion in the sense that if you do resonate with this, and maybe this is someone outside of you, but really, like, this is the thing, is Capricorn doesn't care. Like, Capricorn, Saturn, they don't care if it was the other person, because at the end of the day, you are responsible for yourself. And so it feels like I want you to recognize that if you feel like this abandonment and your self-sabotage, the betrayal, the things that you've done to yourself by not taking responsibility in that part of your chart for maybe a really long time, know that you didn't do that on purpose, and that there are so many layers to our psychology as humans as to why we have these self-defeating patterns. If you have any 12th house placements, especially, like, just know that that is something that may come up for you even more often depending on what planet is in that part of your chart. But even if you have no 12th house planets, you have a sign ruling over your 12th house, and that sign is ruled by a planet that is sitting somewhere in your chart. So we all do this to varying degrees. And so be aware of it. Be thankful for the realization. Be aware of the loss that you feel, and feel it, and also just hold yourself in a compassionate place that you didn't know. But what Pluto and Capricorn, I think, is trying to tell you is like, okay, now that you know, we can't do this anymore. We have to do it in a different way. We cannot abandon ourselves anymore. Yeah. Okay. I'm really glad I came on here again to share this, because I feel like some people needed to hear it. And I think I'm done now. It's so funny. All right. I'll see you guys next time.